Welcome to Legit Street Cars, and today in the Legit Street Quarters we have this, a daily driven 2014 C300 4MATIC. This car has 40,000 miles and it's equipped with the naturally aspirated, direct injected 3.5 liter V6 designated the M276. It also has the 7-speed automatic transmission known as the 722.9. And this car is also owned by a very good friend of mine, a very good lawyer friend of mine, who covered the closing on Legit Street Quarters as a favor, as a gift for buying the building. And then shortly thereafter was quoted about $3,000 to do practically every maintenance item on his car. And I just can't let him pay that much. So in this video, I'm going to do everything for about $650 in parts, and I'm gonna show you guys at home how to do this as well, because this engine and transmission combo was used in many different Mercedes makes for about 10 years or so. It's still being used today, so there's a very good chance you own one of these cars. So this video applies to you, and you can save a ton of money doing all of this stuff at home. All right, so here is our table of parts. We have a couple of specialty tools over here that aren't necessary, so I'm gonna show you a couple of alternatives when we get to that point, but I'm gonna break this down by service. So we're gonna start off with a B service, and if you own a Mercedes, you know what that is. You have your A service one year, your B service the next, back to the A, and so on. And these services are based around a synthetic oil change. A B service at the dealer is right around $550, but we're gonna do it for about $200. Service B exceeded by 85 days. That is my fault. I have been telling my friend that I could do this service for a few months since I bought the shop, practically. So that is my fault. He actually does maintain his cars, and he has an older SL as well. It's really nice. Okay, so while we're in here, I'm gonna reset the maintenance indicator. So we'll go to position 1, and then we're gonna hit phone and OK at the same time. Hold it, all right, and then we'll just go down to assist plus, OK, full service, confirm full service, service carried out. Not yet, but yes. Cannot be undone. Here we go. There we go. We are reset. All right, here she is, the M276 engine. Now this is the naturally aspirated version. They did come out with a twin turbo version of this engine that they're still using today, but everything I'm doing to the engine is still gonna apply whether you have this or the twin turbo car. So let's go ahead and remove this beauty cover, and we can get to the oil filter. So it's always best to remove the oil filter before you drain the oil, so you make sure you get all of it out. And to do that, you need an oil filter cap wrench. So you guys have seen me use my factory Mercedes oil filter cap wrench in all my other videos, but I forgot it at home working on the twin turbo V12. So I ordered this guy, and I just got a whole set off of Amazon. I'll link it down below. And they work, honestly, just as well. It's just a chunk of metal that fits around an oil filter housing. Not a big deal. Grab your rag, make sure not to drip anywhere, and here we are. On our way up, I'm gonna remove the wheels to inspect the brakes, and later we're gonna be performing a brake fluid flush, but I really like these sockets from Sonic. They have a plastic sleeve, that way you don't scratch the finish on your wheels, and I'm gonna be leaving links to all the tools that you see in this video in the description box. A big part of the B service is a major inspection, so we're gonna be looking at brake pad life and rotor wear. And as you can see, we still have plenty of meat on the pads. Now, we would measure the rotor if I thought it was close, but these things look to be in great condition, so we'll skip that part. And we just have to take a nice visual look at all of the steering and suspension components. I don't suspect any issues at all since this thing drives straight as an arrow and feels really tight like a brand new car. It only has 40,000 miles, but we're still gonna look over everything, so make sure that your struts and your shocks in the rear aren't leaking. You're gonna wanna feel around the spring. Find the end of the spring, which is right in here, and just make sure that there are no cracks in the springs. Take a look at your sway bar links, make sure they are nice and tight and the boots aren't torn. As expected, the rear brakes are in even better condition since the front do most of the braking, and this shock looks to be dry. We can actually see the spring top to bottom here, and we can see there are no cracks either. And we're just doing a nice visual on things like bushings. That sway bar bushing looks excellent. There is a control arm bushing. I'll use a little flashlight to look in there. And that's about it from up here, just looking over brake lines and hoses as well. Make sure nothing is damaged or leaking. Now, all Mercedes have a decent amount of plastic covers on the bottom, and they're just held in by a few 8mm. And by a few, I mean probably like 15. Okay, there's that. So that's the only cover you need just to drain the oil, but we need to take this guy off to drain the coolant and this one off to do our transmission service and get a proper inspection. All right, so I know I've ragged on the dealership a lot in some of my earlier videos, and some of their pricing, I mean, come on, we all know it's ridiculous. Where do you go if you want to spend the most money on your car? You go to the dealer, but I don't fault anyone who doesn't work on cars, who doesn't have a garage and maybe has a warranty, they just don't want to mess with it. These cars can be intimidated. I don't fault people for doing that. And trust me, the dealership has plenty of business. All of my friends are absolutely swamped. So these videos are meant for DIY guys. That's why you're watching my channel. With that, it's time for a little bit of maintenance for myself with Keeps, because 2 out of 3 men before the age of 35 will experience some form of male pattern baldness. I'm one of those guys, and I'm doing something about it. So Keeps is a subscription service, and what I love about them is they make treating male pattern baldness easy and affordable, like a boosted LS, by keeping everything online. And it really is as easy as a few drops on your head. Now, it typically takes between 4 and 6 months to start seeing results, so the sooner you guys get started, the better, and that's really easy too. You're just gonna hop online, consult with a real doctor from the comfort of your own home, come up with a game plan, and then Keeps is shipped discreetly to your house automatically. And the best part is, if you guys go to keeps.com/legit, you're gonna save 50% off your first order. So if this is something you've been thinking about for a while, now would be a great time to start. And I just wanna say a big thanks to Keeps for keeping my hair where it should be on my head and for continuing to support automotive content creators like myself. Now, let's get back to some more C300 maintenance. Okay, so while we're draining every last little bit of oil from the engine, I'm just gonna continue on with the inspection. So we're just looking everything over for leaks. And you know, sometimes you'll see stuff like this. This is just considered seepage. A car's warranty wouldn't even cover any kind of repair on something like that. So don't worry about stuff like this. You can just clean it off, monitor it, write it down so you know where to look next time. Not really much to do there. We're gonna be inspecting the flex discs, and we already did. No cracks, so those are good. They're made of rubber so they can crack. The transfer cases on these can leak as well. This one looks to be dry. Again, you can see something here that's really nothing at all to worry about. And then the exhaust system looks to be in excellent condition. Well, you know, except for parts like this, but we're not gonna touch that. There's no repair needed. It's sealed perfectly. The differentials rarely leak on these newer Mercedes. This flex disc is in excellent condition as well. And we're just going around taking a look at bushings. You might see a little bit of flaking there. That's nothing. We're looking for cracks in the rubber, which there are none on that bushing. And this one I can tell is in good shape too. Anyway, with that, we are done draining oil. Good to the last drop doesn't really apply here. We're good enough to seal this up, and just make sure to use a new washer with your drain plug. And we're gonna go ahead and torque this down to 22 foot-pounds. There we go. Oh, and before we fill it up with oil, I have to show you an excellent and free resource that you can all use at amsoil.com. So you just put in what type of vehicle you're working on, and it will tell you how many quarts you need and the drain plug torque spec. You can get your oil filter from there. You can get everything from there. And they'll tell you how much coolant to put in, and for every fluid, they will give you the capacity. This is totally free whether you buy AMSOIL products or not. Okay, so it's best to let this kind of drain for a while. Let me just pull it out. There is a large black O-ring right here we need to replace, just like that. And you install the new one, which will come in any higher quality oil filter. Some of the cheap ones don't come with this, but you really should replace it. And then we're just popping it in, just like that. Okay, now we're just gonna go ahead and screw the housing back in. And this has a torque spec written right on it, 25 Newton meters. Now with the drain plug and this oil filter cap, if you've been doing this for a while, you'll get the feeling of it. You don't need to torque it every time. But if you're new to working on cars, not a bad idea to start torquing, so you just get a feeling of sometimes how little you need to torque something. That's it. Some people just go nuts and turn this guy all the way over here, and you can crack these plastic caps. All right, so you guys who have been around for a while know that I am an AMSOIL dealer. There are about 286 of you guys out there who have used my link down below and signed up as one of my preferred customers, because then you get 25% off, making this just as affordable as any of the stuff you're gonna get at the store anyway, and it's shipped right to your house. Okay, so just like that, our synthetic oil change and our inspection is complete. Obviously, I looked over belts and hoses, but right now we're gonna stay up top and we're gonna knock out the spark plugs. This is $760 at the dealership, and we're gonna do it for less than $100. Actually, the entire spark plug kit from my friends at FCP Euro is only $65. That includes all 6 of the factory Bosch plugs. You get plenum seals as well, and the tool that you must have. So this is a 14mm thin wall spark plug socket. You gotta have one of these. I have one for my 335i. It fits many different cars as well, but I needed one here at Legit Street Quarters, so we got the whole kit from FCP Euro. I'm not exactly sure how FCP Euro still does that lifetime parts replacement guarantee, but they do, and I love them. So with that, we need to remove this plenum. We gotta get the air box off, the computer over there, and then the plenum, and then we can get to the spark plugs. It sounds intimidating, but it's really not that bad. All right, so we have a couple of E10s for the air box. Then we have to remove the connector for the intake air temperature sensor, so click up the little gray tab, and it just pulls right out. Now we don't have the traditional worm style clamp that you would use a flathead screwdriver for, or a little socket. So you got these, and you're just gonna get a little screwdriver, stick it right in there, and these can be reused. I'll show you how we do that a little bit later. And it just pulls out there. And we're just going to slide this airbox right out. Next, we have to remove the engine's computer. So we have a couple of large connectors. And they just pull off like so. Okay, there's a little zip tie in there. That makes life a lot easier if you cut it. We'll replace that later. There we go. And it's tempting to cut these little zip ties as well, but you don't have to. There are just little connectors you can pry off. Save yourself a couple of factory zip ties. There we go. And we just pop out the entire computer, just like that. All right, so I've never actually done the spark plugs on an M276, and I was talking to one of my friends, my dealership friends, about me making this video. And he's like, you don't have to take the plenum off. We don't take the plenum off. You could totally skip that. I'm like, really? I think I'm just gonna take it off anyway. And now I'm looking in here and I'm like, yeah, I think the dealership mentality is kicking in here. I'm not gonna take the plenum off. There's really no reason other than it would be easier to get the plugs out. It's not like we're doing it because the seals have failed or anything like that. So if anything, you're adding a level of complexity that you kind of don't need to do. Hey, we just checked our oil right in the middle. We're perfect. So we're gonna get sneaky with this. I just removed the brake booster vacuum line right here and the dipstick, just because it gives us a little bit more room to this coil. And let's see what happens. All right, so I'm gonna start off with what I believe to be the most difficult spark plug to get to. And it may just be these two on this side that require the plenum to come off. So there we go, connector is off. On that, not too bad with a little flathead. Okay, that's going bye-bye. All right, so I have the connector off right here, and then it just looks like 2 E10s to get this coil pack off. All right, so I'm sneaking on in here. Really not doing too much sneaking. It's pretty wide open. Okay, there are the 2 bolts there. And I'm gonna grab the coil bolts before we drop them. All right, we should just be able to pull this coil up and at them. Okay, it's coming. Come on, coil. It's hard to get a good grip, but we will get it. There we go. All right, there is the coil, and here's the wire. All right, cool. Well, it's definitely tight in there. You can't even really see the spark plug. I have the socket on it right now. There's a swivel at the end of this extension as well. So this is tight, but we're gonna get it, and this is definitely the hard side. If we can do that one, we can definitely do them all. And the passenger side's a cakewalk compared to the driver's side. I think I can make life much easier if I remove this one bracket right here. All right, now I can get straight on the spark plug. Don't even need a swivel. I can't get the power ratchet in here, but that's okay because I got this little ratchet. Love this little guy. It's fine tooth. It gets in everywhere. So once you've broken something free, like a spark plug, you can take it out in short order with this little ratchet. All right, and here is our spark plug. We got the hardest one out, and it looks to be in perfect condition. So these are due at 50,000 miles. The car only has 40, but since it's in for everything else, we're just gonna knock these out. But this means we don't have to take this plenum off, which saves you a step and a few dollars in seals, no big deal. Yeah, pretty excited about this. This should go fairly quick now. Oh, and as you can see, these Bosch plugs are identical down to the blue stripes. So Mercedes just has them take away Bosch double platinum for a little star. All right, so we're going in reverse order. I'm not gonna show you every single one of these. That was by far the hardest one to do. But just know this, we really need to pay attention to the torque spec on these plugs. I realize it's a pain to get a torque wrench in here, but it is possible. And we're just torquing these down to 23 Newton meters. There we go. This is an aluminum head, so you want to make sure you torque it so it doesn't get stripped out. And now that it's torqued, we know the spark plug is clocked properly as well. And you want to do these plugs on just a slightly warm engine. Don't burn yourself. All right, driver's side is all done, and I'm just getting greedy over here. This side has so much room, I didn't even need to pull the connectors from the coils, and we can easily get to the spark plug. So I do believe the requirement of removing the plenum, according to the Mercedes instructions, is probably just to get to that back one, but it was pretty easy. Oh, these are too easy. And new plug going in. Always start these by hand if you're going to use any kind of power tool. And then I slow down at the end because we don't want to over torque. So we got this guy. These little guys we don't need to torque, not very important. Just give them a little snug, don't snap them. And moving on. Okay, so the only maintenance item we may not be replacing in this video is the air filter. This was done about 10,000 miles ago when he had an oil change. So I just want to double check that it's still good. Yeah. Usually if this was original at 40,000 miles, there'd be leaves and dirt and all sorts of stuff in here. So this is pretty good. Maybe we'll hit it on the next service or the one after. These usually go about, 40,000 miles roughly. Okay, so on this side, we are going to reinstall the air box. So just make sure everything falls right into place. You don't want to crack any of this plastic. Plug in our sensor. And then no real special tool is required to close this clamp back up, just like that. Side cutters work really well. These are totally reusable, and our air intake system is complete. And on this side, we're just gonna plug this in, plug this in. We didn't even need to disconnect those since we didn't take the plenum out. And we're gonna go ahead and slide our computer back in. And this just snaps in. There's little rubber bushings there that hold it in place. Now we just gotta go around and clip the harness back. There we go. All right, then we have our brake booster vacuum tube. Put right back into place. Pop the old beauty cover back on. And then I'm just gonna start it up before we move on. There we go. All right, so starting up the engine after you do spark plugs is just something I like to do. It's not really necessary, but I've been doing it for my entire career. And I just want to verify that the engine is still running just as well as it did before we took anything apart, just in case we broke a connector, messed up a spark plug wire, or something like that. That way you're not moving on to other things on the car without knowing for sure that your engine is the same way that it came in. I don't know, just a habit that I've gotten myself into. But before we move on to the transmission service, I'm just lubricating all the latches. I'm going to do this for the doors as well. And that is just part of the B service, to clean and lubricate the latches. So these are already clean. And I'm using the AMSOIL metal protector. This stuff is great. It kind of leaves a little film, but it doesn't attract a lot of dirt. And I find it to work well on latches. So anyway, I'll go around, do that, and the car's going back up for a trans service. Actually, before we do the transmission service, I'm going to do the coolant flush because we're going to have to warm up the engine and transmission to check the level, and right now everything is pretty cold, so we can do this flush and not have to wait for the system to go down in pressure before we open it. So I have popped the cap off up top. All right, so we're just going to turn that, and here comes our coolant. So I have the oil drain, but I don't have a coolant drain yet, so we're using an empty 5-gallon container of methanol that I used to use on my Turbo Trans Am and one of my E55s, the first one. We're using that to drain our coolant into. Whatever works, right? All right, if you guys have been following the V12 series, then you've seen this tool. I use this also on my Audi S4 in Florida. So right now we are going to pull a vacuum. All right, and now we are going to pull in the coolant right here from the coolant bottle. And this way we don't mess around with any air pockets. We've sucked all the air out of the system and now it's filling itself. An alternative, if you don't want to buy the tool, is simply to drain out all the coolant and then just fill it up slowly. You'll have to run the engine, turn the heat on. You might have to blip the throttle a few times, but eventually you'll get it. Most systems aren't that big of a pain to bleed. You just have to be patient, or you just get yourself the vacuum bleeder and call it a day. All right, so with the coolant service done, we are now moving on to transmission service. We're just going to go ahead and crack open this drain plug and let's drain our fluid. So as you can see, this is the blue fluid. So Mercedes went to a blue transmission fluid, and that is not all of it. If you were to remove the pan right now, you're going to make a huge mess. Watch this. There's a plastic tube, which you guys are going to see in a moment. And we just need to push it over. Ah, of course, it still made a mess on me. So we're getting a ton more fluid out by pushing that tube over. Stop. Okay, so while that's draining, we can remove this little cover. Pull this harness out of the way, and we can start removing our E10s. Technically, you're supposed to take the transmission cross member out. It can be a little tight to get these bolts out, but if you get a quarter drive E10 in there, you just save the last few threads by hand, and you can do this. One last bolt. Now there's still going to be fluid here, so don't just go drop in the pan right away. You got to be slow here. Gentle, gentle, gentle. There we go. All right, then you can just pop your filter out. Losing a little bit more fluid. It's best to have a piece of cardboard on the ground, but overall not too bad. Okay, so I turned the engine with the crank bolt by hand so I could spin the torque converter and show you this. That is a torque converter drain plug. So you can drain between 1 and 2 extra quarts out of the converter when you're doing your service, which is all fine and dandy, except this is in a horrible spot. So if we open up that drain, where's the fluid going? In the transmission case. It's going to seep down. It's going to look like a rear main seal leak forever. Most people don't drain the converter because of how big of a mess it is, but we have a way better option. So this is a special transmission drain tool that pumps compressed air into the transmission, and it is going to pump out all of the fluid so that we're flushing this thing completely. As you can see, this is for the 722.6 and .9 Mercedes transmission, but this tool covers a few different transmissions, and here you can see the other adapters that come with the kit, so this will take care of a few different makes and models, and it came from fcpeuro.com. All right, so I've connected my shop air, and here we go. We're giving this very little air pressure so we can kind of control the leakage. If you pump it up too much, it'll kind of squirt all over the place, but right now, we're getting it right into the pan, and I'm not making a mess on my floor, which is huge. Wait a minute, maybe a little bit of a mess. Ah, there we go. You might need to move this thing around a little bit, but you can hear all the fluid just gurgling out of here, and now we don't have to touch the torque converter. That is huge, but we're still draining it. So we've been going for about 3 or 4 minutes now, and the fluid is still coming out strong. So I'd say there was at least 2 or 3 quarts left deep in the crevices of this transmission and in the converter, and it does look to be slowing down now a bit. An alternative, if you don't want to buy this tool, is simply to drain it from the torque converter. You're going to make a little bit of a mess, but at least you know you've gotten all the fluid out of there. And a lot of people just don't do anything at all. They don't drain the converter. They simply drop the pan, fill it back up after replacing the filter, and call it a day. I'd be lying if I said I didn't do that in the past either. I think there's only about a quart, maybe 2 inside of the converter, and the entire transmission, I believe, is something like 12 or 13 quarts, something like that. I'd have to look it up. So, you know, it could be about 15% of the fluid is in the converter. So if you're okay with leaving that in there, if it's a lower mileage car and the fluid looks good, do that. I gotta say, this is really cool. You guys probably can't hear this on camera, but I can hear the transmission cooler up here getting cleaned out. You can hear it flowing. Not sure if you guys can hear that, but we are just about done here. Just a few drips left and the transmission is completely empty. All right, we're done here. We're gonna turn this off, disconnect, and then this just spins right off. All right, so at this point we can install our new Mercedes-Benz filter. Snaps right in. This back part will just kind of lay like that. That's normal. If you remember when we dropped the pan with the old one, it was doing the same thing. There looks to be a little clip here, but it does nothing. It doesn't actually hold it up there. So this is fine. As soon as we zip the pan in, it'll push it back up. Okay, so then we're just gonna take a clean rag and kind of clean this out. You'll find that there are some magnets in here. Don't worry if there's a little bit of gunk on these, okay? That is totally fine. See, this is okay. If there are big chunks of metal on here, that's not okay. But if your transmission is still shifting fine, then just pretend you didn't see it and move on. And I just like to clean the inside of the pan, get all the old fluid out. This is that little plastic tube that I was talking about, and I had pushed it over so that all the fluid could drain out. And with the FCP Euro kit, they actually give you a new one. So you just take that, snap it back in, and you're good to go. You can reuse the old one. I think they give it to you just in case you break this, then you'd be dead in the water. So let's put our magnets right back where they went. And I got this entire transmission service kit from FCP Euro. So it comes with the pan gasket. You do need to replace these bolts that hold the pan in, a new seal ring, a Mercedes-Benz filter, and I think like 10 or 11 liters of this blue fluid. Amsoil sells this also, and I've used it on the Mercedes, and it's fine, but this just comes in a nice complete kit. So I just went with that while I was ordering everything else from FCP Euro. So here is our new pan gasket. We're ready to go. All right, just gonna clean up the gasket mating surface on the transmission, make sure it's free of transmission fluid. Let's go around with a rag and some brake clean. And then with our new pan gasket, we can install the pan. Just be prepared with a bolt, and I like to start off with one of these middle ones. Okay. Don't hammer these down. They don't get torqued down very tight. And then just start this one by hand because it's at kind of a weird angle. I like to thread this all the way up before I get the tool on. Okay, with them all in there, still kind of loose. Give it a few taps, just make sure it's perfectly centered. Then you can start tightening up just a tad, just snug them up with the gun. Be very careful, just like that. So you're just doing 4 Newton meters, and then we're gonna do 180-degree angle torque. That's all 4 Newton meters is. After your 4 Newton meters, you're just doing 180 degrees. You can use an angle torque tool, or you can just do 290s like that. Stretches the bolt out, and you're good to go. 90 and 90. All right, we'll finish up the rest, and then it's time to pump some transmission fluid in. Well, this is what happens when you're working in between garages. I'm still working on the V12 at my house, so I forgot my special tool that screws into the bottom so you can fill the transmission up. Luckily, these bottles from FCP seem to seal in there pretty well. So we're basically just going to be squeezing this fluid in. And this gives me the opportunity to show you guys how to do this if you don't have the special tool, which helps a lot. It really does. Just got to squeeze it in, and probably not going to be able to squeeze all of it. So if I get to the end and I'm running low on fluid, I'll have to pour what's left in one of these into another one. It's just going to take a little bit of time, but luckily with that tube in there, I can pull this out right now and it's fine. You guys saw when I originally opened it, we didn't get all that much fluid, so I'll kind of know when to stop. And I think the total fill is like 10 quarts or 11 quarts, something like that. So right now I have the engine running and we're monitoring the oil temperature of the automatic transmission fluid. So we're at 99 degrees Fahrenheit. We need this to get to 113 degrees Fahrenheit or 45 degrees Celsius. And at that point, we're gonna pull the drain and I'll show you how to check it from there. All right, we're there, 111, 113, let's check it. All right, so I consolidated all of the bottles into one. So this is our 10th liter. And with the transmission at the proper temperature, we can put this in there and we should be just right. Okay, this should start to come out now. Gotta be quick, yep. So this is how you set the fluid here. Right when it starts, right there, right when you start to see a little bit of air in it, you know that the level is right above the tube, and since it's at the proper temperature, we know it is set at the proper level now. So that's it. Go ahead and tighten this up. We have a new seal ring for that as well. And there's no dipstick, so this is the madness you have to go through to set the transmission fluid level on this era Mercedes. It's not fun, and I should probably wear some gloves. But anyway, this is done. I'll clean it up. We got to put some panels back on, and we're moving on to the brake fluid flush. Okay, so the Mercedes-Benz brake fluid flush is due every 2 years, although most people go 5, 6 years. Some people never do it. But if you want to follow that, it's every 2 years. And I like to start off by sucking the old fluid out and then filling the reservoir with the new stuff. And we're going to be using a pneumatic fluid extractor for this. So you can kind of see this yellow color here in the hose. We want that to be clear. Okay. All right, we've sucked out the entire reservoir. And now we can pour in our synthetic brake fluid. And you can see this is totally clear. And then we just go around to each caliper. You want to start at the right rear, the one that's furthest from the master cylinder, then the left rear, then the right front, then the left front. And just bleed each caliper for about 1 minute and double check that the reservoir is not going dry. You're definitely going to have to add some fluid. And with the fluid topped up for the last time, you're done with your brake fluid flush. So this service at the dealer is about $220. We did it for about $12 or so in fluid. An alternative, if you don't have a shop air compressor or that tool, is you can either gravity bleed, where you just crack the bleeders and pay attention to the reservoir until it kind of drains out, and you keep on filling it and close the bleeders, don't get any air in the system. That takes a little bit of time. Or you can grab a helper and you'll crack one of the bleeders. They'll push down, it'll squirt the fluid out, and then before they go up with the pedal, you have to close the bleeder. So that's kind of a little buddy system method you can do. And now I'm just reinstalling the wheels. All the under engine panels are installed as well. And we are coming to the end, and I'll wrap up some final costs for you guys also. As part of the B service, you lubricate the sunroof tracks. So I actually still have some of the Mercedes sunroof grease left over from my dealership days. A few other things I did off camera is set the tire pressure, the spare in the trunk included. And we did the cabin filter not too long ago, so that's part of the B service as well, but it's practically new, so I'm not gonna replace that again. My friend put the wiper blades on not too long ago also, so we don't need to replace those, but the cabin filter and the wiper blades and a tire inspection and rotation, the lubrication of everything, the oil change, that's all included in the B service, the inspection and whatnot. And then they add in the brake fluid flush depending on when you did that, and the coolant flush and whatnot. So the coolant flush, we spent about $35 on. It's $225 at the dealership. That transmission fluid was $225 DIY style, and it's about $750 at the dealer. And like I said, the spark plug's about $750 at the dealer. and we did them for 65. So we're way ahead of the game here, I think. And that'll do it for today's video. So we completed what would have been about $3,000 worth of work at the Mercedes-Benz dealer for about 650 DIY style. And you guys can do this stuff at home as well. If something in this video was too intimidating for you, then pick something else. Do a couple of them. You'll definitely save at least a few $100s. And this kind of stuff, this kind of maintenance work is really fun. Unlike some of the stuff you guys have seen me do on my V12, that is not necessarily all that much fun, especially for the general public out there. I'm still having a good time, even though pulling my hair out, but this maintenance-y stuff is very rewarding, so I highly recommend you get your hands dirty and save yourself some money at the same time. So I'm gonna leave a list down below of some other cars with this engine and transmission combo that pretty much all of this stuff applies to. So just generally speaking, check out the description box. There's gonna be a ton of links to everything you've seen here and some other information pertaining to Mercedes-Benz maintenance. So with that, if you enjoyed this video, give it a big thumbs up, share the video, subscribe if you haven't already, and most importantly, have an awesome day. I'll catch all of you in the next video.